Hi, I'm Emily. I'm the graduate program assistant for the master's students, and I'm joined by Joanne Lee, who's the same as me, but deals with the PhD students, and also Dr. John Vincent, one of our graduate coordinators. So hi, everybody, welcome. Today we're doing a workshop for the MSc and transfer exams. So I'm going to go over like brief what's sort of required and the steps, and hopefully it'll be really quick. And then if you have any questions, I'll open it up after the presentation. Okay. So for MS, I'll start with the MSc, and then I'll start with the MSc, and then we'll go into the transfer stuff afterwards. So the MSc program requirements and exam eligibility. So the program requirements these program requirements are specifically for students who have entered in or after September 2020. Hopefully that's the majority of you. The program requirements and eligibility are slightly different from those prior to September 2020, and that information is on the website. So is this as well. But so for students who have entered the program in or after September 2020, first and foremost, you need to be a registered student at the University of Toronto in order to be able to submit and hold a final oral examination. Course requirements for the MSc students. So you are required to have completed MSc 1010 and have it reflected in your transcripts as either a credit or it's a 0.5 FCE. You're also required 0.5 modular courses and the equivalent of 1.0 FCE electives. So it can be a combination of 0.5 courses or 2.5 courses, whatever it is. I will note that for the MSc 1010, if scientific day is the only outstanding requirement, you can still submit and hold a final oral exam. However, you do need to then also be registered and present at that scientific day. So scientific day this year is being held on May 17th. So if you still have that course component requirement outstanding, I highly recommend that you participate in that in order to be able to hold your final oral exam if you're planning on holding your final oral exam this year. So with PAC meetings, for MSc students, you need to have held at least 4 PAC meetings. And with your fourth and final PAC meeting sort of acting as a mock final oral exam, and on that final PAC meeting, you do need PAC approval. You do need to have your PAC members sign off on your thesis in order to be able to submit and submit a final oral exam package. So the thesis, most of the thesis requirements, there is a checklist on the website, but the main points are that the thesis for the MSc students needs to be 85 to 100 pages in length, not including references and any appendices. Those are separate. So the body of the thesis should be between 85 and 100 pages. And yeah, so looking at the timeline for holding an MSc final oral exam, so you need to have, like mentioned before, you need to have held your final PAC meeting and obtain PAC approval. And the IMS office requires that MSc students submit their exam package at least 6 weeks, so a minimum of 6 weeks prior to the proposed exam date in order to be able to submit it for IMS approval. And then about 4 to 5 weeks prior to the exam, hopefully you'll get approved. And then you distribute your thesis to your exam committee once approved by the IMS. We do require that particularly with your appraiser examiner, is given at least 4 weeks to read and review and prepare to read and review your thesis. And also during that 4 to 5 weeks, we send out all exam notices and instructions to the student as well as the exam committee members. And then 1 week prior to the exam, we send out reminders. And students should be in the process of finalizing and circulating their presentation slides. We do send out reminders to you about that as well. And then for the exam, so you hold your exam, hopefully everything goes well. Most MSc students will require some sort of minor corrections as prescribed by their examination committee for their thesis. And you have, depends on the corrections, but you have between 1 month and 3 months to make those corrections, for students to complete those corrections. And once those are done, we require confirmation of corrections from your supervisor. And then students must submit the final version of their thesis to ProQuest. After which students have then, and if you receive confirmation receipt from ProQuest, students are then have officially graduated from the MSc program and are awaiting convocation. And convocation cycles happen 3 times a year at U of T, I'm sure you all know, from either the June convocation, the November convocation, or March in absentia convocation. That one, there's no official ceremony, and it's convocation in which the student must request. It's not an automatic one. Okay, so that's for the MSc students. So for onto the transfer program and exam eligibility. So again, this is for students in and after September 2020. So again, you need to be registered as a student in order to be able to submit and hold a transfer examination. The course requirements in order to be able to hold a transfer exam at IMS is 1.5 FOE course equivalent with a cumulative A- average. You need to have completed the MSc 1010 and have completed at least the equivalent of 0.5 modular courses. So in terms of PAC meetings, you need to have held at least, you typically have to have held at least 2 PAC meetings, one of which is a sort of a pre-exam PAC meeting in which your PAC members will discuss whether or not your research proposal sort of warrants PhD research. And similarly to the MSc, your PAC does need to approve and sign off on your ability to be able to hold a transfer exam. And as an aside, some students also need to confirm with their supervisor that the supervisor is eligible to supervise PhD students, because those faculty membership appointments might be slightly different, like the requirements for an MSc student to supervise an MSc student versus supervising a PhD student are slightly different. And you also will require a letter of recommendation from your supervisor that they are able to support you throughout your PhD research, and they, support you going forward in the PhD program. In terms of the research proposal, there is a guideline on the website. It's research proposals for the IMS typically are about 20 pages max, not including references and appendices. So the body of the research proposal should be 20 pages. And students should also have demonstrated a high level of research productivity and scholarships. So if you've done scientific presentations, you've published an abstract or a manuscript, something of that nature. And you can demonstrate that in your CV. So the transfer examination guideline is very similar to the MSc one. So students need to have held a pre-exam PAC meeting and obtained PAC approval 6 weeks prior to, at minimum, prior to holding your transfer exam. We need, the students need to submit their exam package to the IMS office for approval. Again, 4 to 5 weeks prior to the exam, students distribute their research proposal to their exam committee once you receive approval from the IMS office. And the IMS office, myself, will send out notices and exam instructions to the exam committee members. A week prior, we'll receive the written reprisal from your examiner appraiser. And students should finalize and circulate their presentation. And I'll be sending out reminders to that. Post-transfer exams, so similar to the MSCs, if there are any corrections that are prescribed by your exam committee, those should be completed. And confirmation of corrections from your supervisor is also required. And after that, I'll be sending a transfer exam form for the students to complete. And once you see the change reflected in Acorn, you also need to have that change then reflected in your program of study on GEMS. So it'll switch. So you need to switch from your MSc program to the PhD program because that'll affect your stipendiary agreement. And transfer cycles are officially recorded 3 times a year. So September 1st, January 1st, and May 1st. So at the start of each term. But can also be backdated. So if you held a transfer exam on May 5th, it will be backdated to reflect the May 1st deadline. Okay, so exam package submissions for both the MSc and transfer exams. It's an online nomination form via MS Forms. In it, you'll need to have your exam committee details. So particularly for your external examiners, so primary academic department, SGS appointment, and contact information. And any supporting documentation that's required. And just some exam committee reminders. So make sure that the dual roles, so the examiner appraiser and examiner chair, have agreed to the responsibilities and are aware of the responsibilities at the time of the request. And the needing to make sure that availability for all exam committee members has been confirmed prior to the exam package submission. All internal members must have an active graduate faculty membership appointment. For quorum to be achieved and for the exam to proceed, it is 4 members minimum. So your supervisor, 1 PAC member, and your 2 external examiners, so your examiner appraiser and examiner chair. And another thing to note is that you also need to pay attention to the arm's length criteria for your external PAC members, or for your external examiners, sorry. And you can do that through checking PubMed and to check with the faculty members, U of T academic department and division. And that is it. And I will open it up to any questions anybody has. Don't everyone speak at once.
I have a question, if that's okay. So granted that you have no issues with your exam package submission, is it ever the case that it takes IMS longer to process than is listed on the website? Or can you kind of depend on that 6 week?
So it's 6 weeks. So the reason that we say 6 weeks is because you want to sort of factor, it'll take about, particularly during peak periods that we're coming into, right, it will take about a week for the IMS office to review your exam package to make sure that everything is, honky-dory. And you also want to give the 6 week submission particularly important because you need to give your examiner appraiser at least 4 weeks in order to be able to review your thesis and write a written report. So that's why we say 6 weeks.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay, some questions in the chat. So first question, questions take longer than the funding. Are you referring to transfer exams or with respect to transfer exams? I'm not entirely sure. Typically students take, corrections take about 2 weeks for students to do. So I'm not entirely sure about that. So the latest that September 2020 students can apply for a transfer exam is about 21, 22 months into the program. So you're kind of looking at May, June of this year. For exams still are conducted online. And you have the option of doing your exam submission package. You have the option of either requesting the use of the IMS Zoom, or you can use either your supervisors or your Zoom, but just as long as we know. So are we the students to send our thesis directly to our appraiser? No, yes, you do, but you do need to wait for IMS approval. And you'll receive email confirmation that your exam package has been approved and that you can distribute your thesis to your exam committee. So yes, students are the ones that send their thesis to their appraiser and to all members of their exam committee. However, you do need to wait for approval from us. Yes, for MSc oral exams, having at least four pack meetings is the minimum requirement. How do you figure out that a supervisor can take a PhD student? Well, you can ask them. They probably know. And I believe it's whether or not they are a full member or an associate member. So if they're a full member, a full graduate faculty member, then they can take on anybody. If they are an associate member, then they can only take on MSc students.
Emily, can I just add, check well in advance with your supervisor regarding their IMS membership, because if they need to get promotion in order to take you on as a PhD student, that may give them time to submit a promotion application, or if not, to arrange a co-supervision with someone who does have full membership.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Vincent. That's a good point. Yeah. So when is the latest the MSc oral exam can be scheduled? Well, it depends. It depends on your funding agreement. It depends on when you want to graduate. It depends on a variety of things. Yes, it depends. I mean, you can hold an MSc exam at any time. Just sometimes are more beneficial than others. And if you have a deadline, like you're applying to med school, I know that the med school deadline to have completed all of your degree requirements is June 30th. So certainly you need to have completed all of your degree requirements and have graduated from the program before June 30th. So then if that's your date, then you need to work backwards from that date.
Aruna, if you have a specific question about your personal timeline, you can always email Emily and
Yeah.
she can discuss it with you.
So how many months in months in advance should we schedule? So it depends. It depends. Do you mean how many months from your final PAC meeting? How many months from your intended graduation date? All of those things, play into it. So I would say have an idea of when you want your final oral examination to be, and then know that IMS requires at least 6 working weeks from that date, and then anything that you need to do before then. Yeah, so for applicants who enter prior to September 2020, yes, you still require 4 PAC meetings, because in theory, you should be holding at least 2 PAC meetings a year. So by default, you would have, if you entered into the program prior to 2020, you might have 5 or 6 PAC meetings, because you should still be holding them at regular intervals. So at 6-month intervals. Does completing the degree requirement before June 30th include submitting to ProQuest? Yeah, so part of the degree requirement is, like, the final component of your degree requirement is submitting your thesis to Quest. So once a student has submitted their thesis to ProQuest, and ProQuest receives receipt of that, so there's no further formatting edits that needs to be done. So a student then ceases to become a registered student at the University of Toronto and has in effect graduated from the IMS program, but they may still be awaiting convocation depending on when their submission date is.
For that question, I was just wondering, so if that includes the submission to ProQuest, how long does it take for SGS to confirm that, or is that IMS that confirms that to then issue that, like, degree of completion letter?
Oh, okay. So if you're looking for a degree, if you're looking for a degree completion letter, you sort of want to do that simultaneously to submitting your thesis to ProQuest, because once in theory, like, yes, you've graduated from the program once you've submitted your thesis to ProQuest. However, if you require some sort of official record of that, then you'd also submit the I think it's called the confirmation of degree request form to SGS, and they'll issue you a letter saying that, yes, in fact, this student has completed all of the degree requirements necessary for their program.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that form can only be done after a successful defense, and sort of at the same time of the submission of your thesis to ProQuest.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
At the same time, submit the request for the letter, and it takes a bit of time from SGS to confirm, I suppose.
Yeah, you want to especially around like May, June, like around what they call like peak times. Yeah, sort of take into account for that letter like 5 business days from SGS.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So if we completed all of the courses in first year and are just waiting for the presentation, yeah, and you're just for this. So this is for a transfer exam. So if you've completed all of the courses and you're just waiting for the presentation, I'm assuming from MSc 1010. Yes, it's possible to apply for a transfer. It depends when you're scheduling your when your exam is being scheduled. because, so say for instance, you're still missing the scientific presentation day, which is on, scientific day is on May 17th. And if your exam is scheduled for May 19th, then yes, it will be like a conditional approval. You can submit an examination, like a transfer examination package to IMS before that, with sort of the understanding and sort of confirmation that yes, you will be presenting at scientific day, and after we receive confirmation, then the exam can continue. Ideally, if you can, so the question is like, should you present at scientific day in first year? Ideally, yeah. I mean, if you have enough stuff and you have time, and you want to get it out of the way, sure. Present in first year. Then you can also present in second year and third year and fourth year. You know, make it a tradition.
I have a quick question.
Yep.
So if my transfer exam is scheduled for at the end of April, I was wondering if can I do my the IMS Scientific Day presentation like next year? Do I have to do it this year?
You have to do it this year.
Okay, thank you.
You can also do one next year too. Scientific Day is fun, guys. It's gonna be at Hart House. They have good food. Any other questions? Okay. So there's a student who asked if there has to be a minimum duration of weeks between the fourth PAC meeting and the final PAC meeting. So it depends, because like sometimes your fourth PAC meeting is your final PAC meeting. Depending on how you've scheduled your exams. So, or depending on how you've scheduled your PAC meetings in the past. So some students have their final PAC meeting is their fourth PAC meeting. So you don't need to have like a fourth PAC meeting and then a fifth. But if you're sort of a little bit more than 2 years into the program, or you haven't received PAC approval for your that your thesis is good to go and you could submit an exam package, then yeah, I mean, you might need to hold like a fifth with a, you know, with the mock presentation, with the mock exam presentation. But you want to give your PAC members at least like 4 weeks if there's been any changes to your thesis. You want to at least give your PAC members like 4 weeks to read your thesis again. So next question is, do we have to compete in the poster competition to present at Scientific Day? So do you mean like the Alan Wu poster presentation or the Laidlaw? Because there's 2 poster competitions for Scientific Day. Okay, so you do need to submit an abstract to the Alan Wu poster competition, but the Laidlaw one, you don't have to. You can submit it to both. The Laidlaw is not as large, and you might not be like selected to present at the Laidlaw, but you will be presenting all abstracts at the Alan Wu poster presentation. Will be presenting. So the fourth PAC meeting. So there's a question, the fourth PAC meeting is the thesis defense, or is it just before that? So the fourth PAC meeting is not the thesis defense. The fourth PAC meeting is sort of considered like a mock exam, in which your PAC sort of gives the okay and the approval that your thesis is good to go for holding a final exam, for holding a final oral defense.
So Emily, just to point out, the leg law competition is a manuscript competition, not a poster competition. I'm not sure if that was clear.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I misspoke. Anybody else? Relatively clear on guidelines and deadlines. So there's another one. I'm assuming all PAC committee members have to finish reading the thesis before arranging the 4th PAC meeting. Yeah, they do. Again, you want to give them time, about 4 weeks, to read your thesis, particularly if it's what you consider like the final version of it, or the final draft version of it. How long before?
End up.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nijin.
Thank you for the very useful session that we have with you. I was just wondering if you have any questions, because I have asked many questions right now, but I don't know whether if we have more questions after this session, how we can reach you. Can we?
Yeah, so the easiest way, you can email me. I'll put my email in the chat. I'm also at the IMS office 3 days a week, Mondays, Wednesdays, here right now, and Thursdays. If you have any questions about your own timeline or the guidelines or anything like that, you can contact me.
Thank you so much.
So there's another question about how long before we defend must the thesis be submitted? So the thesis submitted to the IMS office, or so your thesis, including additional documentation, so your entire exam package, we require a minimum of 6 weeks, of 6 working weeks prior to your defense. For both the MSc and for a transfer exam. Any other questions? So yeah, I do have a phone number. I have to look it up, but the easiest way to sort of set up an appointment is, yeah, through email. If you're not comfortable with coming into the office or you're not on campus, yeah, you can schedule a Zoom meeting as well. That's fine too. Look at my phone number. And yeah, so all examinations are currently online for the MSc and for transfer exams, at least until the end of the semester, if not going into the summer semester as well.
Sorry, so they can't be in person, or?
For MSc and transfer exams, no, they're not in person.
Okay.
So how long do you have to wait till after the 4th PAC meeting to submit your thesis to IMS? It depends. It depends if your exam committee, or not your exam committee, sorry, your PAC, like, depends on how many edits if there are any that your PAC recommends, and how long it takes you to finish them. But you should sort of, if you hold your final pack meeting and everything goes well, you know, and you sort of have a defense date with your PAC committee members in mind. I mean, you can submit it, I don't know, what, like 8 weeks after your final PAC meeting. There is no, you know, there is no requirement like you must wait 2 weeks or whatever prior to exam submission after final PAC meeting. As long as your PAC approves that you're okay. That's the main thing. Yeah, the 8 weeks is the maximum. Does it usually take people that long? Yeah, it can. So it can take people that long to sort of make any necessary edits that your PAC committee has recommended. But it can be as little as 2. So. It really depends. Any other questions? Relatively clear? Sort of feel a little better about the process? Okay. Oh, Aaronan has an extreme question. Okay. So let's say a person does their defense in the last week of their funding period and would need to finish a major correction. Would the person need to get extra funding? So, like,
I can answer that if you like, Emily.
Yes, please.
So if your funding period is up, then your supervisor doesn't have an obligation to fund you any further, but you can negotiate with your supervisor, you can discuss that with them. They may well be willing to support you until you've got your corrections done. But you know, if your funding period is up, it's up to their sort of good grace to see you through your corrections.
Just to add to, there is also, the SGS does also a master's bursary completion fund. They have one of those. And so if your supervisor doesn't have any additional funds, you can always apply for that bursary.
A great point, Emily. Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Okay. So if there are no other questions and everything is sort of relatively clear, I think we'll end. So thanks, Dr. Vincent, for coming. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Joanne. And yeah, so my contact info is in the chat. Should you have any specific questions for me? And thanks, everybody.
That was great, Emily. I think there was a lot of information in the slides as well. So I suggest to everyone to download those and hang on to them.
It was recorded, and we'll also put it up on the YouTube channel and also Temerty Connect. So they'll have access to it that way as well. So thanks, John. I'm glad thanks for coming.